Well, Jesse, I want to thank you for coming today. It's been a long 5 years. I
Yes.
just thinking about this thing. It began in 2012, and what we mean by this thing, we'll go into detail. It's the South Bend Police Tapes, and I just wanted to make sure we kind of give people who don't know what this is just a real brief overview. Um, and help me with this. Sometime in 2012, probably February, March, somewhere like that, Karen DePape, who was that time the director of communications for South Bend Police, doing her job, maintaining the system, came across some recordings. And as part of her job, she began listening to them. She said in her notice of tort claim, which we have up here, that she heard racist, unethical, possibly criminal conversations that were taking place between four officers during working hours. She became upset, concerned, went to the then chief of police, Daryl Boykin. And apparently she had heard all the tapes at this time. Went to Chief Boykin, I guess, which they were actually on the server, recorded on the server. I think we were told. He listened to, I think he said one. Decided to take that one to the mayor. Is that correct? And then
That's what I understand, and there's been a lot of controversy over whether or not the tapes were recorded legally or
Right.
illegally, or they part of wiretap. And it was my understanding at the onset of this that the reason that she was even listening to any of this was that they had a malfunction with that recording system, and the recording system had went down, and they had gotten repairs done. So then she had to monitor all the lines and listen to them to make sure that all these lines were recording properly. So it's not like anybody honestly just went in and said, hey, we're going to go record Brian Young's line or Richmond's line.
Right.
She was in essence doing her job.
Right.
And then the mayor came out and, oh, hey, I'm saving them from federal charges on this.
Right.
Which was another issue that bothered many people, including myself. I was like, well, wait a minute. If there was a crime committed here and charges should be brought for this crime, then by you saying you saved them from charges, aren't you in fact undermining the justice system
Yes.
and hindering an investigation and stopping prosecution that probably should have took place?
Yeah, and there's a lot you just said, because first I would think that kind of statement should either come from a federal prosecutor or the county prosecutor, reference to there's some criminal involvement here, and we're going to look into it. That's the first thing. But I know what struck me odd, and in fact I looked at that time to find the city policy, and initially what bothered me was the city policy said that city employees have no expectation of privacy when using city equipment.
Correct.
So, I'm thinking, wait a second, shouldn't you have gone to these officers and disciplined them for the things that were on the tape, number one, but the fact that they were using this, according to what Mr. DePape said, for non-business reasons.
Correct.
Okay.
For personal reasons.
Right, but because you turn that around, and I got an article here dated April 14, 2012 from the South Bend Tribune, written by Tom Moore, and he said the Tribune had filed a FOIA request, Freedom of Information request, seeking the factual basis of the DePape's termination, and what they were told was that she violated City Policy 21.4.2, conduct unbecoming a city officer, which she was doing her job.
Correct. And she was a civilian employee too.
Right.
So, I mean, as this unfolded, and it's drug out, as you said, for 5.5 years.
That article was April 2012. We sit here as August 2017.
Yeah. So, I mean, as it started to unfold, it also struck me odd that, a lawsuit proceeded, settlements, followed. You know, right now, as we look at it, the last figure I saw was really close to $2 million total between legal fees, settlements, and so forth, that it has cost taxpayers for the situation that still lays unresolved today. That figure, I'm sure, has grown because it was hemmed up over in the Seventh Circuit Court in Chicago. Now it's being tossed back here to state court, so I'm sure those figures have added up. Another big concern is, you know, today, you know, we've got Tim Corbett, who is one of the guys
Just
in
announced
this,
for sheriff today.
that
St. Joe
announced
County.
he's running for St. Joe County Sheriff today. Unfortunately, our news media, even though I approached the media prior to this and I said, hey, look, I said, you know, a couple questions you might want to ask is, do you feel this tape issue is going to affect your campaign for sheriff? And number two, will this tape issue be solved prior to the election, which I think is maybe next May?
Yes. Yeah, the primary is next May.
When Tim Corbett finished what he had to say and opened the floor for questions to the reporters, you could have heard a pin drop. Nobody wanted to ask questions. We had a couple rallies this week in town. We had One Peace rally. We had another rally for DACA for immigrants. And I honestly, since, you know, we had a big thing in the news about Virginia and the racial tensions down there, you know, we hold a peace rally here and we've got people talking about racism and, you know, wanting to stop it here, but not one time were these tapes mentioned. And that's one of the more important things that was said was on these tapes was a lot of racist remarks and innuendos. So, I mean, I just don't understand why the local community, if we're going to hold these rallies and, you know, we're going to talk about the violent thing that happened in Virginia this week because of racial tensions, you know, why aren't we going to include these tapes in that? Why the big silence?
Well, you know, again, what struck me, you know, I didn't attend the rally on Monday in downtown South Bend, but I had a chance to see a tweet from the mayor saying that he was on the way to the rally, that, you know, paraphrasing, stand against racism. I thought, as you said, when this whole thing began, there's a lawsuit filed in federal court by the officers. County Metro Homicide Commander Tim Corbett, and I can't remember the other officer's name.
Brian Young.
Right, who is South Bend Police
victim.
Stand, right.
Yeah, now he's
with the county.
He's the head of Special Victims Unit with the county. You've got Dave Wells, who is no longer with South Bend, who is
He
now...
was the special job, county job,
He is the head of
was
the new
created
drug...
for him,
The new drug task force.
which is county.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'm also told that Richmond also is employed via the county police department or the county
He is
street department.
He's
maybe?
well, one of them is the warden, or was the warden at the jail.
Yeah, I'm told that all of them
Right. All
that were
four
involved
currently have either county jobs. We know 3 has county jobs,
Right.
and I believe the 4th one is a warden at the jail.
could be.
A county officer just mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. But at least 4 are on the public tax payrolls.
Correct.
Okay. Well, what's a problem with that is what Mrs. DePape said, and we've got it up on the board, which is the middle document there, with the heading during law office. And this was the notice of tort claim
Correct.
that her attorney, Scott During, filed. It's a public document. And what it said was that she had heard, as we talked about, racist, unethical, possibly criminal conversations. Okay?
Right.
So, now, think about this. All right, public document, it's filed. She received a settlement. And matter of fact, $500,000 was paid out to the 4 officers and their wives for
Right.
being on this tape, or the series of tapes, because we got to go into that too.
Correct.
This actually spans a couple years, okay? Or not just 1 tape, 2 tapes, but a number of tapes, okay?
Correct.
Which everyone admits, or at least Metro Homicide Commander in front of the county city council, because I want to be able to tell people where we get this information from, so they don't just think we're making it up. It wouldn't
Right.
be fair to these officers or anyone for us not to be able to say where Commander Corbett appeared, I think it was last year, because we were there in front of the city council, maybe it was a couple of years ago, and he made the statement that there was only one person that heard all the tapes. That was Mrs. DePape. Now that's important for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into them here.
Right.
Okay, that's important for a lot of reasons, because the first thing is, if Mrs. DePape is the only person that heard all of these recordings, then when you have a Tim Corbett or Dave Wells or any of their supporters say there's nothing on the tapes, how would you know that?
Correct.
If out of your own mouth, and we've got a recording, okay, I posted on my Facebook page, and you can go back and look, but we've got a recording of him saying to the city council that there's only one person that heard all of the tapes, and that's Mrs. DePape.
And actually, there was a gathering of the press after that meeting, which is also fully recorded.
Right. And it was on my page. I shared it from your page to my page.
Where Mr. Corbett basically said, they're not going to roll over anybody that wanted to put the gloves on and get in the ring. Basically calling, I guess, citizens out to a boxing match. But he had made the comment that if anyone else,
which is a violation of county ethics.
Yeah, if anyone had copies of the tapes or listened to the tapes, that they would be sent to federal prison.
He would arrest them himself.
And he would do everything in his power to make sure that happened.
Right.
There's a lot of rumors out there that others have listened to them. But to just flat out say, well, hey, there's nothing on those tapes. Right. And you supposedly yourself haven't listened to them. He talks about innuendos from the public.
Right.
That in itself is an innuendo.
Right.
Obviously.
Exactly.
Like I said, I just find it shocking. We've got elections that are going to be coming up for the sheriff, which is one of the most powerful positions in our community.
Well, it's the chief county law enforcement officer.
Right.
Outside of the prosecutor, this is the next important law enforcement officer in a county of what, 200,000-300,000 people.
Correct. And I mean, until this is solved.
And he's got the support of the Democratic Party, Jesse. Think about that. That's frightening.
I just don't understand how you could even run for a position with this big monkey on your back, knowing that the community, I mean, obviously, their ploy is always to drag it out.
Sure.
The people will forget, the people will go away. This hasn't went away for 5 years.
Well, but there's a lot of other questions that are troubling. How do you elected officials not demand that the tapes are played? I mean, the county council, of course, signs off on the prosecutor's budget. Mm-hmm. The prosecutor is employed by the county, who then employs Tim Corbett and some of these other guys.
And the rest of them.
Okay, so we've had 5 years of budgets being approved, I guess. Okay, and I know because I've gone before, and you've gone in front of them recently, and they seem to be very receptive to having the tapes played. I guess I know the first time they were shocked when we presented our facts. Right. And I don't know what the result was last time. Do you want to talk about that?
I recently approached the county council and I implored them to write a letter stating that they support the city council in their endeavors to end this matter and get the tapes played. I plan to send an email to Raphael Morton. I've also asked some other people to send Raphael Morton an email, being that he's the president,
right,
and see if he can garner signatures from the rest of the council, because the county council is kind of ran free with this. They haven't really been approached.
Their feet haven't been held to the fire.
Yeah.
Other than one time, I think we went in 2012, 2013, somewhere like it was somewhere like
Correct.
that.
But they've basically went under the radar on it because, people have went to the city council. The city council were the guys that were pushing, involved in the legal battle. The county, when I approached them about a week ago, I said, hey, look, you know what? These guys no longer work for the city. They work for the county now. And basically, if these tapes get released, or should I say when they get released, if what is said to be on there is actually on there, I would hope that the people who are involved in these tapes no longer hold these high-ranking positions.
Of course.
when that happens, the county then has to worry about replacing the commander of Metro Homicide, replacing the commander of the Drug Task Force, and the commander of the Special Victims Unit, which are very important, obviously, units in our area. And this is going to fall on the county. So I really feel like the county needs to step up to the plate and make their voices heard as well in this.
Well, also, I would think they want to mitigate their liability because, you know, based on what Mrs. DePage said and some other things that I know after one of the stories that WNDU ran, there was a guy who was obviously a police officer, El Fuego, or who just ran this whole thing. And one of the things he said, and I don't know if it's true or not, but one of the things he said was the convictions of a lot of black defendants would have to be reversed. I don't know if you saw that on my Facebook page.
Yeah,
when
I
he said
did,
that.
actually.
And I don't want to say that's, I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently wherever he got this information from or heard it, and matter of fact, I had one of Tim Corbett's supporters come up and just, he didn't deny what the guy said. What he said was, there's just nothing on the tape. And so
Right.
we keep going back to this. Okay, there's nothing on the tapes, but if there's nothing on tapes, first of all, play them. First, I mean, that doesn't make sense. I would think, and you talk to attorneys about this, and attorneys will tell you that after the 4 officers and their wives filed a lawsuit, because probably need to talk about the lawsuit, okay? The lawsuit was settled for $500,000, which was split among the 4 officers
Correct.
and their wives, okay? So let's say $100,000 each, okay? Attorneys will tell you it is nearly unheard of that a lawsuit is settled without proof of damages. How are you damaged? That's number one, okay? Because that was the thing they said in the Deshaun Franklin case, where the jury decided on giving the Franklin family $18 when those three, this is unrelated, 3 other officers with the city went into the family house at 3:10 in the morning, and the jury made that ridiculous award. But what the jury said that their determination was based on the fact that the Franklins didn't show damages. So my point is, how were these officers damaged? Because we don't even know what was on the tape. You got paid for being defamed. What was said that defamed you, because we never heard the tape?
The other thing that was just alarming is, you know, and anybody that knows about a lawsuit knows you have a defendant and you have a plaintiff.
Yeah.
And all parties,
Everybody got paid.
all parties got paid. The other thing that,
Including Mrs. DePape and the 4 police officers and their wives. We have the settlement up there, the release and settlement
Right.
agreement, signed off on her getting paid.
what
They
is
didn't say she
amazing,
lied.
what is amazing is, you know, we keep being told there's nothing on there, there's nothing on there. We've actually been told also that Boykins said there's nothing on there,
Well,
but
you
we
only
know
heard
that
one tape.
Boykins only listened to one tape, if he even listened to the
Right.
entire tape. Miss DuPage, who is supposedly the only person who listened to all the tapes, has made these claims in her tort under oath,
Right.
and even though she was paid, has never recanted
Right.
what she said,
Right. And-
which says a lot.
Well, not only she never recanted, if you look at the release and settlement agreement, which is up here, she was basically was made to agree to not to even publicly discuss this.
Correct.
So if there's nothing on the tapes, why
Why a gag order?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense also that if you look at the release and settlement agreement, that all the parties signed it, which means they had to approve her getting more than they did. That doesn't make sense if there's nothing on the tapes, and also if she violated city policy.
Most recently, and obviously, I know you chimed in on the social media post. I had a major discussion with one of the officers involved, Dave Wells.
Right.
Came to the defense of Tim Corbett, more or less.
Well, and we've got his statement, his handwritten statement. I think I showed
And
it.
in the statement and also online, basically he made it out in the statement for sure that Tim Corbett and himself and the other officers had never been reprimanded. You know, we all know that
He
at
was
one
a
point,
good officer. He never,
yeah,
Tim Corbett.
at one point, Tim Corbett, for a lack of better terminology, supposedly went to Niles, Michigan.
Well, not
allegedly.
supposedly. He was disciplined.
Yeah, it was in the paper.
Right, right.
And strong-armed,
Right.
for you know, lack of better terms, strong-armed someone on behalf of
A major campaign
a
fund.
major campaign person.
Right.
Then, when this police tape issue came out, he was also reprimanded because
He
of
threatened the South Bend police
yes, an
officer.
altercation with Jack Still.
Right.
Uh,
Corporal Jack
over-
Still, South Bend Police Department.
over the police tape
How do you
issue.
how do you threaten a police officer? And if you and I had done that, we would have been criminally charged.
Well, now,
I mean,
if I'm correct, I went through, I guess you'd call it a trial, of Jack Still
Right.
shortly thereafter the fact. And am I correct? He's no longer an officer with
no,
South Bend Police?
Corporal
or
Still is an officer.
He's still
yeah.
right.
He was disciplined, and Tim Corbett was there. You know, they got like 3 days off. Something like that. I don't know if the discipline was the same, but both
Right.
of them were disciplined.
Well, I know Tim Corbett was disciplined for threatening Mr. Still.
Right.
And Mr. Stilp was supposedly disciplined for releasing.
Making it public. At least.
Yeah,
Right.
making
That's
it
what-
public because he felt as though he was not getting a fair shake.
within the police department.
Yeah, at the
Right.
top rungs.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, this whole thing has been a total nightmare since day one. And you know, when you think about the numbers, man, over $2 million, and we still are no closer to a resolution today than we were on day one. And one of the main people involved in this is going to run for sheriff. And I mean, you know, when you stop and think about it all, if in fact these tapes contain what they say they contain, the gentleman that said, hey, look, all these people that have been imprisoned are going to come forward. Well, look, once it's found out that you've, you know, committed these crimes, if that's what's on there, your credibility is lost.
But this is a man who's running for sheriff.
Correct.
And I would again agree with you. I would think people would want to have this thing aired out before they vote for sheriff.
I think that's a must.
Yeah.
I think that is a must. I really hope the city council realizes that, the attorney's working out for them, and the judge, whoever the judge is that's going to handle this, that this isn't something that can drag out for another year, because this needs to be taken care of and put to rest prior to that election in May.
You know, one of the things that bothers me, I've had police officers tell me they've worked with Tim Corbett, and Tim Corbett is racist. I have a lady who's a member of my congregation who's white, and she said that Tim Corbett and another officer's deceased now, a few years ago, put her in handcuffs and kind of punched her around because she was dating or married a black guy, and called her a nigger lover. Tim Corbett came to a black church 2 weeks ago, Jesus and Emmanuel Church, which is Pastor Graylin Watson's church, was asked, have you ever used the N-word? And his response was, yes, but a lot of other people have. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, no one's the same, Jesse. I mean, you know, certainly people do things in their past, but I think I would want to have him say, hey, I said it, I'm sorry.
Right.
You know.
I mean, obviously, you know, he's been in law enforcement for a lot of years.
Yeah.
He's probably done a lot of good things
I'm sure he has.
in the community, and he, for the most part, he's probably done a good job at what he does.
Right.
The issue at hand, though, cast a big shadow over that, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be resolved. I mean, you know, the mayor came out and he talked about equality and transparency.
That was laughable. I mean,
and so forth. You know, we're never going to have that here in this community until this tape issue and several other things are put to rest.
Well, I got two things to say. First, I want to get back to the mayor of transparency, because the word you should have put in there was diversity. He talks
There you
about
go,
that,
diversity.
and you know, fighting against or standing against the racism in Virginia. Two thoughts. First of all, a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years, my sister-in-law was murdered in South Bend. My wife's sister And in calling our niece to let her know to let the Army, because she was in the Army, let the Army know that she needs to be sent home to take care of her affairs here for a month.
Right.
I talked to one of the senior non-commissioned officers there, and this sergeant said, well, a guy called and said that her mom had been shot. Don't worry about it. Well, she had been stabbed to death. It turned out the guy that called was her boyfriend, the mom's boyfriend, who had actually stabbed her. So I took that information, okay, the phone number, and I told this woman, I'm going to give it to the police. You need to talk, because it would be the guy who committed murder if he's saying,
Right.
You see what I'm saying? My wife and I went to Metro Homicide. I sat in Tim Corbett's office. I took my phone out. I showed him the phone number. I gave him the lady's name, and they were able to arrest the guy. So I don't have any ill will against Tim Corbett. I just want to say that. I mean, I think in that situation they end up arresting this guy. The guy was prosecuted. The guy's doing time in prison. So, this is not part of Get Tim Corbett.
Correct.
This isn't that, okay? The reality is something is wrong here with this tape situation. I mean, the guy could be the greatest officer since Wyatt Earp, but what's on the tapes, according to Mrs. DePape, is disturbing in the conduct, the lies that have been used from a lot of David Wells, Tim Corbett, the mayor, as to why the tapes weren't played, okay, are just so obvious. We pointed out that they haven't given us any valid, truthful reasons, Jesse, why they can't play the tapes.
Well, and then we haven't even touched on it yet. Councilman Henry Davis at the time filed a letter or complaint
to the Department of Justice.
To the Department of Justice, and in his letter, basically, he quoted what the South Bend Tribune, I believe, had put out about what was on the tapes. And his letter was, hey, would you please take a look at this? These officers then decided to file a suit against Henry Davis. Now, if I'm correct,
Who was an elected official at the time,
correct,
trying to get to the bottom of this.
and they're suing him for slander,
Defamation.
libel, defamation, whatever.
for putting in a letter what was already published.
Right, in public news. So, if I'm correct, that case was dismissed by a local judge.
Right.
And then these officers have now appealed that.
Right.
And are still pursuing that. So I'm not an attorney, obviously, but I was told many times over my years that if you are trying to defend yourself in a legal battle, that you are in fact entitled to review the evidence that is going to be used against you in the court case. So in this case, Henry Davis Jr. and his attorney, I would say, could say, hey, look, you know what? We need to listen to these tapes because you're claiming I slandered and defamed you about what's on those tapes. So, they may be the saving grace as far as hearing what's on the tapes. I would assume the judge in that case would also need to listen to the tapes.
Right.
So, I just, one way or another, I think eventually they're going to be played. I just think it needs to be sooner than later, like I said, with the
certainly
announcement today.
before with a candidate for sheriff, Tim Corbett, being on the tapes and saying what Karen DePape said was on the tapes, keeping in mind Tim Corbett said that there was only one person that heard all the tapes, which is Karen DePape. Keep in mind that she got paid $250,000 and with a release agreement that requires her to remain silent, while the other 5 defendants, the 4 officers of Wyatt, got paid $100,000 apiece, a total of $500,000. That is strange. The other thing, you talk to attorneys, and I have, because I want to make sure I got this understanding. Attorneys said in that lawsuit before the settlement was paid out, the 5 officers versus the city, claiming the city had violated their rights,
Correct.
By this taping system. Attorneys tell me again, the case was settled without proof of damages. Did you get psychological treatment? What emotional treatment? but there was also no discovery. In other words, okay, hey, because attorneys could do this. We were already told and there's a letter from the U.S. Department of Justice from David Capps,
Right.
who is
He was the Attorney General.
Attorney General Northern District. He wrote a letter at the end of May in 2012 saying he had conferred with Justice Department experts, and based on everything, viewing everything, there was no federal violation. So
Right.
for 5 years we've known there was no federal violation. That's the guy who would have prosecuted DePape and
But yet,
Chief
the mayor stated that he saved them from federal prosecution.
which you can't do, obviously. You can't. I mean, that's
So-
like you going into First Source Bank robbing it, and the president of First Source Bank says, "Hey, Jesse, just put the money back," and
Right, and we'll forget about it.
yeah, that's not going to work. But see, again, that is the long list of lies that have been put out there by the mayor mainly, Tim Corbett, David Wells, as to why the reason the tape shouldn't be played, because there's nothing there, is the bottom line. There's nothing there, which that doesn't even make sense. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. But you know what? One of the things that really bothers me is the community response. Okay, the black community, which should be really interested in hearing what's on the tapes, because Tim Corbett, Mrs. DePape said she heard racist things on it.
Correct.
Okay. But here's Monday night. This turned out at this peace and anti-race rally.
Right.
And there are no black people Jordan Geiger and Kevin Hoggart and a few others.
Right.
Nia Okereke and some other people were there protesting. But their voices got drowned out, and then the press didn't even cover what Jordan was saying, who was giving all the statistics about the condition here, the 54% poverty and the 24% black unemployment, and 75% of school-age kids eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at school, and
Right.
The impact of the 1,000 houses in 1,000 days. And of course, as you know, the $1.7 billion in public work contracts, zero to black employees. But if you're on the outside, you ain't getting anything anyway, and you're a contractor.
We
1.7 billion. How much of that did you get?
and that is another obviously another topic.
Sure.
That at some point we'll get in.
We have to, because it's a
that.
lot. That's corruption, which you've documented.
Correct.
I've seen a lot of the stuff that you have.
So, I mean, I guess just to let the people who are watching this know, and obviously it'll have a title at the beginning, but you plan to sit down monthly with people from the community.
Right. I'm going to have you on again, because we got to go into that whole corruption thing.
And basically, you're going to do a nice little casual sit down.
Right.
Right. And we're going to discuss the state of South Bend.
Right, exactly.
There's
because the media's not. I mean, if they did their job, investigative reporting, then really it wouldn't be any need. But
Right.
years ago, back in the late '80s, early '90s, Dave Rombach, who's passed away now, was a writer of the South Bend Tribune, and I asked him one day. He was covering a story, and I said, "Hey, Dave, why don't you guys do investigative reporting?" And he looked at me stunned, and he said, "Well, why don't we do that?"
Yeah. Well, if I remember right, not long ago, and obviously it's a little different topic, but there was a statement on social media that someone had talked to a news media outlet and said, "Hey, I don't understand why this wasn't reported on." And they said, "Well, it really doesn't do anything for our ratings." And I mean, that's what it's boiled down to.
Right.
Media as a whole has become about ratings,
Right.
and fake news is another whole topic that has gotten out of hand. But I mean, just so that everybody knows, this is going to be something we're going to do. We're going to touch basis on
State of South Bend. We're going to do it once a month, and we're going to
all kinds of topics.
right.
good,
It's just
bad, and the ugly.
Of course. And it's really, and I think it's important people understand, we're going to come with documents, we're going to come with facts. I hate to watch a show and guys are like, "Well, I really think," and you go, "Well, where's the proof at?" we have documents here. We use documents, and we'll always use documents and facts and photographs and
Correct.
as
And
we-
anybody
right.
that has a doubt, or anybody that wants to see the documents, obviously sitting here talking to them, pointing at them, and seeing them on this video, you're not going to be able to read them up close. I mean, myself, anything I've got,
Right.
and Mario, you've seen a lot of my stuff.
Sure.
I got 15 gigs worth of stuff.
Right.
I launched some federal investigations here locally, state investigations.
Exactly.
So I have no problem letting people review the documents that I have.
Sure.
You know, I spent the time pulling them for a reason so that I could prove what I was saying was true. And obviously, you know,
I've had
you've
these
done
on
the
my
same
Facebook
thing.
page, but you know what's talking about that. I know, and this is kind of like a little different topic. It's still corruption with the mayor, but that thing that the mayor's chief of staff did when you had the pictures of the city workers
Correct.
on her private property.
Keep talking. I'm gonna make sure we're still recording.
Okay,
Mario.
on her private property. I just think that's on her private property. You had pictures, not one but many pictures of city workers working. In fact, the neighbors had called and said, "Hey, look,
Correct.
that's what got you onto it." And then we went out there and protested. The mayor's chief of staff at the time, okay, was having work done. And you had the pictures. You said,
By city workers
By
with
city
city
workers.
equipment
Well, the truck, it was at least one truck and maybe two out there.
for her own personal and private gain. Now, if you remember, that got investigated. A grand jury was
Right.
convened.
Right.
I still have an email from someone who was within, and they said, look, a special prosecutor was brought in. They said basically the special prosecutor really wanted to handle this, and basically they were told, oh, wait a minute, you know, we've got something else going on here, bigger fish to fry. So basically she was acquitted. Well, then right after she was acquitted, she resigns from being a chief of staff and disappears.
Yeah. But that's happened in this administration.
It's not this. The problem is this isn't the only instance.
Chief Teachman.
Sitting with
Right.
sitting with a state police detective, and just have after speaking to a FBI agent, a state police detective tells me face to face, Mario, we're off the record, off recording at the time. He says, look, you know, we brought the feds in because the prosecutor has tried to hinder this investigation
The county
on
prosecutor.
more than one occasion. Yes, our county
Who
prosecutor.
hires
At
Tim
that point,
Corbett.
at that point was Dvorak.
Right.
Now, I mean, you know, hey, I mean, you know, truth is truth.
Right.
So this is a state detective telling me that Mr. Dvorak, who at the time was the prosecutor, tried to hinder this investigation on city employees and so forth. Well, Mr. Dvorak's no longer around either. I find it really odd that a lot of the players that have been involved, not only when my suit was active, but also throughout this police tape issue. If you look around the city, Mario, a lot of them people are gone. And then we are told, well, we no longer work for the city anymore, or they're not here no more, so it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, I can't count the number of times I've been told, well, hey, this person's no longer here, so it doesn't matter.
So you can steal, rob, cheat the taxpayers, and as long as you go,
Well,
it's cool.
another prime example, and I know we're kind of getting off
Right.
topic, but
But-
we can come back on
Right.
Right. another show and talk more in depth about what we're bringing up. Phil St. Clair, who was the head of the Parks Department, his son, I received information anonymously through my post office box that the Park Department had decided to farm out the mowing of the city cemetery, which isn't a huge job.
Sure.
But this contract was for 30-some thousand a year to mow the city cemetery. Well, when this person sent me this information and I started digging into it, I found out that the company that was doing it was a company that had been purchased and bought out by Phil St. Clair's son. Now, you got Phil St. Clair, who's the head of the park department, the son who's got his hands in a
Isn't
lot of
he
business.
related to former Mayor Joe Kernan?
Yes, I believe they're cousins or something of that
something
nature.
like that, right.
So
you got patronage and nepotism.
So I start digging into this, and then I find out through my investigation that not only does he have the contract to mow the cemetery, but for approximately 6 years, he had housed his equipment and ran his business more or less out of the large garage at the city cemetery. So I took it to the council and I said, well, wait a minute, he should be on the hook for fair market value rent for 6 years. Utilities, insurance, it was a huge liability. Well, shortly after I take it to the council, I happened to run across him at the city cemetery garage loading his equipment up when there's 16 inches of snow on the ground.
You got some film of that.
And, yes, and vacating the building days after it was taken to the council. I pursue the city about what's going to be done about it. The same with I did with the patio situation, and nothing was ever done. And basically, and I still have the email and the letter from the legal department saying, well, he's vacated the building.
Again, he's gone.
So that's what I'm saying is these things just they pop up and you start to investigate, and I guess for lack of better terms, swept under the rug. We had equipment dropped off in the city garage, big dollar equipment, Bobcats, I'm told, maybe some zero-turn mowers, big dollars worth of equipment. Someone covers a camera in a bay at the city's garage and dumps this stuff off out of nowhere.
They cover the camera.
Yeah, supposedly covered the camera. So I asked for the camera and a list of equipment. Well, I had also launched a state investigation on that. They refused to give me the footage and said it was under state investigation.
How long ago was that?
This was about 2.5, 3 years ago. So when the state detective contacted me and I learned that the state investigation had been concluded, I reached out to the city with a FOIA again and said, hey, look, I'd like a list of this equipment and the video from that property. They then sent me a letter and said, well, look, we understand the state investigation's over, but it was picked up by another entity, which I have to assume would go to a federal level. Right. That was 1.5 years ago, and still no closure, no resolution on that either. Yeah. Nor can you get the public information that should be free to the public because they claim it was under investigation. So these are the things we deal with every day. People don't understand.
It is just not one, it's not two, it's not three, it's this local government.
A lot of people, I think, don't honestly understand the time and effort that myself, you, and several other citizens really put in to dig up facts on this stuff before we ever even come out with it.
You know what's in, I don't want to just run on because we could be here for
days.
Days. But one of the things that struck me again, going back to this rally against violence and racism, and the mayor's coming out against racism. Do you know, by the end of the year, we only had 5 black officers in the South Bend Police Department.
Unfortunately, I heard that.
There's been numerous civil rights lawsuits filed by black officers. I mean, I don't remember a time in South Bend in modern history, since the 60s and 70s when we've had 5 black officers. We used to have black division chiefs, captains, lieutenants, 5 black officers. I think we started, within the last 2 years, we had 30 or something like that. 5. They're leaving, they're retiring, they're going to, Officer Davin Hackett went to Elkhart, and even a white female, Joy Phillips. Yeah. She went to Elkhart, and her parting shot was she'd much rather be on the street with the bad guys than work for this department. Well, a lot of issues there, but I don't know how people can give this mayor a pass for saying he's against racism and supports diversity when you have the lowest number of black officers just about in modern history in South Bend.
Unfortunately, Mario, the mayor has touted transparency, diversity,
he's mouthed it a
and
lot.
Inclusion
right.
For years now. They also, from what I understood, they had implemented some things within the police and fire departments some time ago to try to make them more diverse. As we can see, that really hasn't worked out yet. Then he created a position for a diversity officer
and paid $90,000.
about $100,000 a year. hired a diversity officer that's now been on the job for at least a year,
Right.
if not better. And as of last week, I heard we're hiring an assistant for the diversity officer.
He's
Since we haven't seen any results, I honestly, I haven't heard, I don't think, really one iota out of this diversity officer, other than I saw on social media where her son was involved in a shooting,
right.
and they had set up a GoFundMe page to raise money for her son's defense. Other than
she
me
makes
seeing
close to
that,
$100,000, and we're setting up a GoFundMe.
other than
And the media didn't even report that it was her son. They reported the dad. They named the dad.
who was a football player,
Right, Notre Dame
correct.
football player, but never named. So when I brought up her name, they were like, "Whoa, what are you doing? What's somebody?" I'm like, "Well, you gonna name the dad, but not the
And as I
mom."
said, what kind of change have we seen in the diversity of the city? We've seen it. The diversity has declined. It's
Well,
shut down.
Let me tell you a story about that, and then I know we're going to wrap up. I don't want to run on. The Monday that the mayor and this diversity officer had a press conference, and they're committed to diversity, I got phone calls from white police officers right after that, and they said, "Mario, Wednesday, come to the police. They've got that auditorium
Right.
where they have promotions and they give officers awards. These cops, white cops now, said, come on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So I go. Okay, now keep in mind the mayor and the diversity lady on Monday said they're committed to diversity and starting now. So I go 2 days later and I'm sitting in the auditorium. They promote 5 white captains. Now, you've got Chuck Stokes, who's been over 20 years. He's
Right.
been a training officer for just about every sergeant, lieutenant, captain, division chief. Okay, you've got Sam Diggins. Okay,
Dave Herron.
Dave Herron. Nate. I can't remember Nate's last name, but you got black officers. All of them have topped off as sergeant except for one. Okay, and so you promote 5 white captains that Chuck Stokes trained on. So he's good enough to train these people.
Right, but not good enough for the position.
Right. So anyway, the tapes, the tapes, folks, you got to demand that the tapes get played. I mean, this is insane. You got a guy running for sheriff who's on the tapes and lying, saying there's nothing on there, when the lie that he told about there's nothing being on there is contradicted by him saying that he didn't even hear all the tapes. This is the tape did.
Correct. That's the biggest thing. I mean, people need to, I guess, they need to wake up.
Yeah.
This has to be resolved and settled prior to this election for sheriff.
Well, it's crazy. The mayor constantly fires on Donald Trump, fires him constantly about you're not, you're racist. But you look at the results here of what he's doing, and it's the same thing. I don't know. I don't know what Donald Trump's hiring policies are. But I do know what's going on in South Bend. All politics are local. My concern is here. But they want you to ignore here and point the finger. Look at what's going on in Virginia and Washington. But you're paying Tim Corbett and 3 other officers $500,000 to call people racial stuff.
Well, look, I think we should wrap it up.
Thank you, my brother.
This is going to be our first recording of
here.
many.
Be back next month.
I hope everybody watches this to the end. And until next time, see you later, guys.
All right, brother.
Good to be here, Mario.
God bless you, man.